counts 1 and 2, each of which is murder in violation of Ohio Revised Code section 2903.02a. Count 1 being the murder of Dominic Russo, count 2 being the murder of Davion Flanagan.
She was sitting in a jail cell, talking to her mother on a recorded line, when she said the words that would define how the entire country sees her. There's a third victim, and it's me. 2 young men were dead. She was the one behind the wheel. And from a cell in Cuyahoga County, MacKenzie Shirilla wanted the world to know that she was the one who'd really lost something that night. So what actually happened on that road in Strongsville, Ohio? And does the evidence back up the story she's been telling ever since? Here's who MacKenzie Shirilla said she was: a heartbroken girlfriend who lost the love of her life in a freak accident neither of them saw coming. And here's what the evidence says happened instead. MacKenzie grew up in Strongsville, a quiet suburb about 20 miles outside Cleveland. She started dating Dominic Russo when she was 14 and he was 16, and by 2021 the two were living together, reportedly at his parents' house. Friends and family who later spoke to investigators described the relationship the same way, over and over. Toxic, volatile, on again, off again, with real anger underneath it.
Dominic was 20 by the summer of 2022, and by most accounts, he was trying to build something. He was interested in music and stock trading, close with his brother Angelo and the rest of his family. Davion Flanagan was 19, adopted at 8 years old along with his 2 sisters, and had been a standout running back at Strongsville High before a knee injury ended that path. He wasn't MacKenzie's best friend. He was Dominic's friend, pulled into the same orbit, the way friend groups work in a small town. On the night of July 30th, 2022, the 3 of them were at a high school graduation party. It was, by every account given in court, a normal night. Nothing about it suggested what was coming. In the early hours of July 31st, they got in MacKenzie's Toyota Camry to head home. Dominic sat in the passenger seat. Davion was in the back. Investigators say MacKenzie drove down a 3/4-mile stretch of road until the car hit nearly 100 miles an hour. Then she drove it straight into the brick wall of a commercial building. Dominic and Davion were killed instantly. MacKenzie survived.
If you've watched the Netflix documentary on this case, you already know the broad strokes. But documentaries have runtimes, and runtimes mean things get cut. We went back through the actual trial record, the sentencing transcript, and verified reporting to find out what really happened and what's actually still unresolved. If that's the kind of true crime coverage you're here for, hit subscribe, because we're not done with this one. At first, this looked like a tragic accident. A car, a quiet road, a horrific outcome. But investigators didn't stop at the surface, and what they found changed everything. The car's event data recorder showed MacKenzie's foot was pressed to the accelerator at its full extent, and the brakes were never applied before impact. Not a tap, not a swerve, nothing. Surveillance cameras near the scene caught the car making a normal, controlled turn onto the road. Then, prosecutors say, the car accelerated and never slowed down.
The judge later said MacKenzie morphs from a responsible driver to literal hell on wheels in that footage, and called it the single most important piece of evidence in the entire case. Then there was the timing. GPS data placed MacKenzie's phone at that same intersection 3 days before the crash, a location prosecutors say she had no reason to be at. They called it a dry run. It's worth noting a detective testified that cell phone GPS data isn't exact, so there's some uncertainty in pinning down precisely where she was. But combined with everything else, prosecutors argued it painted a picture of planning, not panic. And then there was the relationship. Weeks before the crash, evidence showed MacKenzie had threatened to crash her car while Dominic was inside it during an argument. Prosecutor Timothy Troop told the court plainly, "There is no doubt that this happened because of the relationship with Dominic, and the defendant's intent was clearly to end that, and she took everybody that was in the car with her."
MacKenzie's defense team had one real counter-argument, a medical condition called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which can cause sudden drops in blood pressure and fainting. The theory was that she blacked out behind the wheel. Here's the problem. No medical report, expert testimony, or verified documentation of that diagnosis was ever presented at trial. It was raised, it was never proven. MacKenzie chose not to testify. She waived a jury trial, putting her fate in the hands of one person, Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Judge Nancy Margaret Russo. On August 14, 2023, Judge Russo found MacKenzie guilty on all 12 counts, including 4 counts of murder, declaring flatly, this was not reckless driving, this was murder. A week later, at sentencing, the courtroom heard from the people this case left behind, and from MacKenzie herself. Davion's mother, Jamie Flanagan, stood up first. She told the court her son was so much more than what this case had reduced him to. "My son did not have a clique of friends, but instead was a friend to all," she said, describing how he went out of his way for people who were often overlooked by everyone else. Dominic's mother, Christine Russo, didn't hold back either.
She'd lost her son and watched the public conversation around his death become, in her words, something closer to entertainment. Then came the moment that's defined this case ever since it resurfaced this year. Before the verdict, in a recorded jail call with her mother, MacKenzie explained why she wanted to testify. "If they see the truth, then they'll know that this was nothing but a car accident. They'll just see that there's a third victim, and it's me, and I lost the love of my life and a good friend, and now I have to deal with this grief the rest of my life." Prosecutors pointed to a pattern they said proved exactly the opposite of remorse. While MacKenzie was hospitalized for weeks after the crash, investigators learned she and her mother were reaching out to a Los Angeles modeling agency. After her release, she attended a concert in a wheelchair and later took part in a TikTok dance video on Halloween, dressed in what looked like a corpse costume. Dominic's brother, Angelo, addressed her directly in court. He pointed to her own words to police after the crash, asking if they could just suspend her license for 10 years instead, and called it proof of who she really was, the most selfish person I know.
When it was MacKenzie's turn to speak, she didn't deny the loss. She apologized, calling Dominic her soulmate, saying she wished she could remember what happened, saying she was heartbroken. What she never did, then or since, was say the word intentional. That's the gap this case keeps circling back to. A girl who insists she's a victim of an accident she can't remember, standing across from a court record built almost entirely on the argument that she remembered exactly what she was doing. So where does this stand right now, in 2026? The conviction itself is final. The 8th District Court of Appeals upheld it in 2024, and the Ohio Supreme Court already declined to review that direct appeal. That door is closed. But there's a second fight happening, and it's still very much alive. MacKenzie's current legal team filed a new petition arguing her original trial lawyers failed her, specifically that they raised the POTS defense but never backed it up with an actual medical expert, the same gap we just talked about.
The problem is that petition was filed on October 24th, 2024, exactly 1 day after the 365-day deadline, because 2024 happened to be a leap year. Lower courts rejected the late filing, so in April of this year, her attorneys took the fight straight to the Ohio Supreme Court, arguing both that the clock should have started later and that ineffective counsel cost her a fair shot at the verdict. The Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office has asked the court to throw it out entirely.
As of now, the justices haven't ruled. MacKenzie remains at the Ohio Reformatory for Women, where her first chance at parole won't come until October of 2037, and where, according to her own prison disciplinary file, she's been found guilty in 32 separate conduct violations since 2023. So the real question isn't whether the crash happened or who was driving. It's whether a clerical deadline missed by 1 day over a leap year ends up mattering more than anything that happened on that road in Strongsville. We don't know which way the Ohio Supreme Court is going to rule, and we're not going to pretend we do. What we do know is that this case isn't finished, no matter how settled it might look from the outside. This channel exists for exactly this, going past the documentary, past the headlines, and into what the record actually says. No agenda, no sides, just what's verified. We'll be back the moment there's an actual ruling on this one. Until then, subscribe so you don't miss it.